Sign of 100.
You get the time to teach.
Uh-oh. Yeah, this is when I try to get fancy.
Don't make Leo.
Big
Big enough.
Camera being reversed.
Okay, let's call the October 17th regular meeting of the Orono Town Council to order. We have a full agenda tonight, which includes an executive session and a workshop, so we'll try to be very efficient. The roll call shows that all members are present, where we believe that Council Sonia Fetishel is going to be joining us on Zoom. Not sure that she's there quite yet, but she is. Great. So all members are present. Under agenda review, just I want to have you note that there are two orders that are going to need amendments. So when we get to them, order 22-200 and 22-203 will need to be amended. And I have asked that order 22-199 on the consent agenda be removed from consent agenda and placed under new business, just because of the size of the amount of money involved. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Then approval of minutes of September 12th, 2022. Could I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second. Thank you. Any corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Oh, do we have to do roll call?
Right, because we have
On your abs. So I'm afraid we have to do roll call.
Council Barrett,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
in favor.
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
I have to abstain. I was absent for that. We were part of that.
Council Berthel,
In favor.
Council Kenny, and Council Lowry.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor, there were none opposed, and 1 abstention.
And that's public comments, and this relate to items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments that are not associated with the agenda? I know we have some folks here, but they are here for an item on the agenda, I believe. Okay, then we'll move on to public hearings. An open public hearing A to consider a vitulous license for Stillwater Nutrition, 5 Mill Street, Suite 1. Mr. Esty.
Hello, everyone. Patrick S.D., Code Enforcement Officer, and all my recommendations are for police and fire and our town clerk. And so we are recommending approval.
Thank you. Any comments for or against this item? Okay, I will close public hearing A and move on to public hearing B. To consider a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license and vitulous license for S&M Corporation doing business as Thai Orchid, 28 Mill Street, Orono.
We are asking for a conditional license. The hood needs to be cleaned, and they have it scheduled for December 5th. So we're asking for a conditional until we can inspect that.
And that was a 60-day
Yes.
license. Okay. Any comments for or against the issuing of this license? Hearing none, I will close public hearing B and move on to public hearing C. To consider a class 1A hotel malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing and entertainment, and vitulous license for Black Bear Inn and Conference Center for Godfrey Drive.
We're asking for approval. All inspections have been completed on this.
So I would just note, this is a new business.
Yes.
So you might have already, you guys have done the municipal side of a liquor license for this establishment already this year, but where this is a new
You won't.
entity, you have to do it again. So we go in, we haven't received any police complaints. The code inspection, life safety inspection was fine. And then, there isn't a lot more to look at beyond that for this one.
Are there any other comments for or against the issuing of this license? Then we will move on to close public hearing C and move on to public hearing D. To consider a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, entertainment, and vigilance license for Woodman's Brewing Company, doing business as Orono Brewing Company, 61 Margin Street.
Inspections have been completed and we're recommending approval.
Any comments for or against the issuing of this license? Hearing none, we will go to public hearing E. To consider a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualers license for Orono House of Pizza Incorporated, 154 Park Street.
And inspections have been completed and are recommending approval.
We are, there is one issue pending that town council should know about with this establishment. We have received a noise complaint. So it is not to the point where we have gone beyond our investigation of this. It hit my desk just kind of recently. But the police department are evaluating. We've worked with this particular business owner in the past around noise. They've been very receptive. So at this point, while we know there is a concern, we also don't have any reason to believe that the business owner won't come forward and try to resolve that concern.
Thank you. Any other comments for or against issuing of this license? Then to close public hearing E, move on to public hearing F. To consider a class 1 golf club, malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, victualers license, and auxiliary license for a mobile service bar for Penobscot Valley LLC, doing business in Penobscot Valley Country Club, 366 Main Street.
And inspections have been completed and are recommending approval.
They have paid their personal property tax and their sewer. They are current. Council doesn't consider real estate because we have a way to secure that payment, but they applied on time. They had their material and they had paid. So this is a really nice shift of events for this new owner.
Nice. Any other comments for or against issuing of this license?
Can I just ask just a quick question? The license for the mobile service bar, is that going from pole to pole?
Yes.
I'm not a golfer, but I have to say, I can't imagine that you can't get through a round of golf
Without having a
service
mobile
bar.
service bar.
Although it seems pretty busy.
Okay. Any other comments for or against the issuing of this license? And we will move on to public hearing D. To consider a Maine Municipal Association Model General Assistance Ordinance Appendix A through G for the period October 1, 2022 to September 30th, 2023 to be in compliance with Title 22 MRS Section 4305, paragraph 4.
Yes.
That's you.
That is me for right now. So I thought I would take just a moment, because we have some new folks here and some other folks that have been participating that might not know about general assistance. General assistance used to be known as local welfare program. Every municipality in the state of Maine is required to have a general assistance program. If you are really a geek and would like to go and look at the law, it's Title 22 or Chapter 1161. And so the town council many years ago adopted the model ordinance. So this is the ordinance that the state and MMA issued for us. And if you look at our code of ordinances, it's right there. Every so often, every 5 years or so, we go through the process of evaluating that ordinance to make sure it still complies with what the state requires. So while the general assistance program is required that every municipality has it, and it's required that we fund it, and it's required that we staff it, we really are acting more like agents of the state when we perform these duties, because we get a case, we call the state, we review the case, the state gives us guidance in what we do. This is emergency stopgap assistance for basic needs. And I need to just clarify, a basic need is what the state says is a basic need. It is not necessarily what we think of as basic needs. It's shelter, medicine, food. Sometimes transportation is included, but oftentimes it's not. So things that we would see as basic to survival in Maine are not necessarily allowed under this program. I think the piece that we spend the most money on in Orono is actually the burial. So we are required to bury people who don't have the funds to bury. So when we look at a case, somebody makes an application to us on a form that, well, Shelley might make it look pretty, it is the state form. And we ask for information about their income and their expenses. Based on that, we determine whether or not they are above income levels for the program, if there is an emergency need. So there are times that we are assisting people who are above income because there is a need that we can get DHS to agree is an emergency need. When we call the state and we follow our ordinance and we follow the appendix and we follow what the state tells us to do, we get 70% of our expense back from the state. We get reimbursed 70%. So there are people that come in that do not qualify for general assistance. And as long as they haven't been disqualified because they have done something on their own to disqualify them for the program, we would move them into, you might not qualify for this program, but what about their various community resources that we would try to connect them with? And the last effort for us is we do have a small fund. We call it the heat fund, but it's really the overflow general assistance fund. So it's for people who have a real need, have documented that real need, but don't qualify. So each year, the state and Maine Municipal Association work together using federal resources to update the appendices, and counselors got the appendices. They were also filed for the public to be able to access through the website. Those appendices, if council looked at them and said, gee, we are really seeing a problem. We are seeing people coming in for rent assistance, and what the ordinance says is the acceptable level just is not enough in our community. We could go out and do a survey and come up with justification and data and make a case to Department of Human Services for different different maximums. That's something that takes time. So what we have done in the past, as we periodically review this program, I talked to Shelley Crosby, who is our general assistance administrator, and we talk about, is this working? Are we seeing people with needs that exceed the income guidelines? And what I've heard from her pretty emphatically is no, we're not seeing that somebody's coming in for rent and I'm not able to assist because the number is too low. There might be other reasons we can't assist, but not that. So if that was something we wanted to look at, that would take some time. And we have to adopt maximums every October. We don't have a choice. We get them in September and we have to adopt them in October. So when we talk about general assistance, that's the why we're here. When we talk about general assistance, to put that in perspective for Orono, last year we served 10 people. We had 6 applications. We paid for 3. we had 10 people and we spent $1,500. In 2021, we had 13 cases, we paid 7, meaning 13 people case were households applied. We funded 7 of those applications, serving 19 people for $5,712. In 2020, we had 16 applications, 7 of those applications were funded. We assisted 20 people at a cost of $2,578. In 2019, and there's a reason we're going back to 2019, we'll talk about it in just a minute. In 2019, we had 28 total cases. We paid 14 of them. We assisted 22 people. And we paid $5,860.68.
Could you give those numbers? I'm sorry, if we had 28,
28 applicants, 14 were paid. 22 people were assisted. So there are a couple of reasons why in Orono people get kicked out. As you saw, the application to paid ratio is pretty different. I think the primary reason that we see people get kicked out is that if you are under 25 in the state of Maine, your parents are required to support you. So unless you can demonstrate why your parents can't support you, sometimes we've had minors who have been emancipated or who have been able to document that they simply don't have a relationship with their parents. We've had parents who have applied and are also eligible, so that kind of works. But the general rule of thumb is if you're a student going to the university, the state is going to kick you out from getting assistance unless you're living on your own and over the age of 2. So those are kind of by the numbers. These are not, we usually have been budgeting about $14,000, between $13,000 and $14,000 a year in expenses. One of the things that's happening is when the pandemic came in, we started to see a massive influx of money and services come through. So we have seen a real drop off in people who qualify or people who are even asking. Unfortunately, we received news today that there have been voucher programs to help people maintain housing. They promised everybody 18 months of housing. Evidently, they didn't keep track of how many they were giving out, and the program was out of money. So we are now seeing people who are on 13 months thinking they had another 5 or 6 months to transition to some other housing. So Shelley and I are expecting these numbers to go up. The other piece is during the pandemic, there was quite a bit of money that was dispersed, and so that made it difficult to qualify. So that money is no longer part of the equation. So we are expecting an increase in the need and an increase in the amount of money that we're spending in this program. So when we think about,
as a profession.
Sure.
Is there a significant fund balance? If we're budgeting 13 to 14, or does that doesn't build up?
no, so we budget 13 to 14,000. We have 70% of that also budgeted to come in as revenue. So when we don't spend as much, we don't get as much revenue. So it's not a pure pass through, if that makes.
But if we budget 13 and we for several years paid $2,000, $5,000, whatever.
Yeah, we're also not getting 70% of that in revenue. So you're getting an offset there. So we have a revenue budget. We budget 70% of our expense budget to come in revenue. So it's a much smaller number that would actually tie to the
So the
bottom.
way we budget is 13 to 14 grand is what we figure we're gonna spend, but so we don't put, we put 70% of that.
No, we put the whole 14 here,
Okay,
but we also put the matching projected revenue if we expended all 14,000 into the revenue budget. So when I don't spend all the revenue, I'm also not, all the expense, I'm not collecting all the revenue. So that's one way. Yes. The other thing to think about with this program, under state law, there are two areas that towns can overspend without permission. One is in general assistance and the other is in winter road maintenance. So we are, even if we put 14 in there and we end up expending 20, we are not, can't get in trouble for that, not that the council gets in trouble. So let me talk just a little bit. I don't necessarily need to go through every number on the appendices, but I will tell you, I took some time to compare the FY23 this year to last year to give you a sense of what the difference is. In overall maximum guidelines, it changes based on the number of people in the home, but it is approximately 5% increase over last year. Food assistance is approximately 12.4% increase. Housing, they differentiate between heated and unheated housing. Unheated housing is up a little over 8%, and heated housing is up closer to 10% as a maximum. To give you a sense, for a studio that's heated, the maximum amount per month would be $811. So Shelley is telling me that that's coming in where we are seeing people. Electricity, with or without hot water, with hot water is up about 41%. Without hot water is still up about, that one's 40. Oh, sorry, without is up about 41%, with is up a little over 42%. And then personal household supplies and the supplements for households with children under 5 years old have stayed flat. So personal supplies, 1 to 2 people is $45, 3 to 4, $50. It had stayed the same. The burial costs have stayed the same at $1,475 for a burial, $1,025 for remains. So it is what I would expect, given where we've seen increases in electricity, housing, food. Yeah, I said food is up about 12%.
so those are the rates, and then does everybody qualify for some different percentage of help on those, or is that?
The first number that I said, that overall income and eligibility number, that is the maximum amount of assistance that we're supposed to give. It also is the income level that somebody can come in with. Given the way this is established, it is not supposed to be something that people who are on TANF with Social Security would qualify for unless there was some kind of emergency. You will notice that medication is not on here. That is a case-by-case basis that we work closely with DHHS to determine what is reasonable, necessary. We don't get into that. Somebody tells me they need help with medication, we shift the prescription to DHS and let them figure out whether it's optional, necessary, how much. So have I given you enough background?
Thank you for that. We're still in public hearing. Are there any other comments for or against adopting this? See any?
No.
No. Okay. We will close this public hearing and move on to public hearing H to determine determining the best interest of the town regarding a request to dispose of property located on Essex Street, tax map 006, 004059. And are you gonna start us on that?
I am, I'm gonna ask Mitch to come on, because he was my colleague for this one. As we talked about with town council previously, staff received a request from, abutters to this property, the Mitchells, asking if we would consider selling them this property. And I don't know if you'd like to hear from them before I go into what we found, because you sent me back out to do some more research about this property.
Why don't you continue and then we can.
So this is as we talked about during the committee, this is a parcel that at one time was in single ownership or owned by the same people, was also owned the Mitchell's land. They were delinquent on both accounts. When we sent out the notice of automatic foreclosure, a mortgage company stepped in and took care of one account. The mortgage did not cover the second account. So I'm not sure how we got to that point, but we were there. And so you had a 0.13 acre, 0.13
Yes.
acre parcel of land that is just a parcel of land. So this land sits in the forest and agriculture zone. It has not historically had a building on it, so it is, while it is a legally non-conforming lot, it would have to meet setback and other regulations in order to build on it. So when we got our trusty pencil out and started sketching setback requirements, minimum lot size for septic and well, because this lot would require both public, both private septic and well, this is not a rental lot. So you have a parcel between two other homes, 1.3 acres, about 50 feet on the road frontage. On one side, the depth is 95, on the other side, the depth is 100 feet, and it's 62 feet from corner to corner. So we went out to look, not just take in Google experience, and searched for pins. And we were only able to find one pin. So with that one pin, it's really hard for us to tell you where lines are. We don't have the capability. But we can say it is a very crunched area. That on one side, you have the Mitchells in their garage, their little overhang on their garage. It's perfectly legit to think that probably some of that is likely over the line. On the other side, down. And it looks like their house, if not over the line, comes very close to them. So, when we look at the things that council needs to determine, as you look at this particular question of, do we want to get rid of the property? The first question is, does the town have some overarching better use than to have it be back on the tax rolls? The answer for that from my staff, public safety, public works, looking across the gamut, we don't see a reason why the town should maintain ownership of this parcel. So our recommendation to you would be to go ahead and dispose of this parcel and get it back on the tax rolls. Our second question that I assume you're asking me for a recommendation on is how you get rid of this parcel. If you look at the ordinance, it's pretty clear that, and it's not just in this area, it's in the procurement policy period, which is where disposal of town property lives in that same finance ordinance. It is clear that the goal that the town has is to keep this as open to the general public as possible. That you want to avoid the appearance of making deals, which makes sense. When I look at, so the options that you have, you can sell it through sealed bid. In this particular case, to sell it through sealed bid doesn't seem to make reasonable sense to us, because you'd be selling a parcel that potentially has issues with the abutters it can't be built on. So why would you? The negotiated sale process is a little bit different. That's like putting a for sale sign up and negotiate. Again, don't know that the general public makes sense for the general public to have the ability to buy this property. So it really comes down to two options. One is a sale through an abutter sale, which the ordinance very clearly describes as both the butters getting notice at the same time that the town wants to sell it. Any minimum amount that we would want to sell it for. And giving a deadline that they have to respond to the town by. And what they're responding to the town with is how much they would buy it from us for. There is no guarantee that both will participate. But at the end of the day, I think the argument is you've given both sides the ability to participate if they so choose. The other would be an alternative sale, in which case I think if council wanted to go through the alternative process, that's where you would say, we really think it should be this person and we want to negotiate with this particular person or people. In that case, I think it would be important during the order that you have a conversation about what is the best interest that is served by different method. Because that is the last option in the hierarchy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Folks, you were here for this item. Is
Yeah.
there anything you would like to say? If you do, we should come up to the table.
Sure.
You're on,
Oh, okay. Okay,
and you have to be close to be able to be heard.
okay, sure.
Would you identify yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Sandy Mitchell and I own now that other property at 2547 Essex Street. I think we should be able to purchase it compared to, I'm not, the neighbors are probably great next door, but they didn't have much of an interest because that at one time was part of, you know what I mean, that the whole, property type of thing. And part of our garage is on that. And then part of our, I don't know if you call it the entrance to our property or exit, to our property is on that parcel of land. And basically, when we purchased it about 11 years ago through Vision Property Management and stuff, we didn't realize how much trouble we were, not us, but Vision Property was, because they didn't even pay the taxes. So we didn't even know about that part of land until after a couple of years. And then when we called about purchasing it then, basically the town said at that time, we couldn't try to purchase it. It would have to be Vision Property because it had to be, they had to own, the property. And then, so, and anyways, it changed hands quite a few times. We got an attorney and so now we own it, the other part of the land. And like I said, Bob has, mowed it, take care of it, for the last 11 years. And like I said, nothing against like the Youngs or anything, but if they get it, there's going to be like an issue because of our garage and because of the entrance and everything else and stuff. So that's why I think we should be able to purchase it and stuff like that. And I mean, we were told, I know years ago, once we had it in our possession that we'd be able to purchase it. And now, what I mean, there's these extra steps, and I realize that, but I think we should be the ones that should be able to, purchase it because we, have the most interest in it. Bob's taking care of that land. I'm not sure if anything could be considered grandfathered in. It's been 11 years, I don't know. But I think, us taking care of it, and everything else should be, considered, because we thought that once we had it in our hands, that we owned the other part, that it was going to be like almost like a no-brainer, to be able to, purchase it. And so, that's basically.
I couldn't tell from your letter, from the pictures, which, thank you for that,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
is, have you talked to them, the Youngs? Have you had a conversation?
No, we haven't. I mean, I don't, Bob, have you talked? No, that's, yeah. So we didn't really. I mean, so maybe like you said, because since we've been there for 11 years, there was like 3 different owners of that property and everything. And I don't know how many years that they've been there now.
They were notified by the town at the meeting.
Yes, and Nancy she was real nice. She was telling us the process and everything.
Have we heard from the Youngs at all?
We have not, however, we notified them, we sent a letter, it got kicked back. So on Friday, we went and asked the PD to deliver it to the house, we posted it at the house, but I'm not sure if they know 100% or not. We tried to find a telephone number, no luck, we tried to find email, no luck. So that's, if this were to go through a sale to a butter, both would be notified by certified mail, which.
And there would be a time limit, right?
Yeah,
To
I think
respond.
it's in the ordinance, it's either 30 or 60.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not to speak too quickly. I mean, I'm inclined to think that you have every reason to want this, and I think it's very
Right.
reasonable to. I don't think, I think when we discussed this at the previous meeting, we mentioned we don't want to be like stirring up trouble.
Right, well,
amidst
see,
neighbors.
that's what we were saying. I mean, we don't really know the Youngs, but we don't want to create like an issue, either. And
So, I mean, I just think if we haven't heard from them, the next time we try to get them involved, I mean, I don't see why we would drag that out too much longer.
So from a process standpoint, you're in a public hearing. right now.
Yeah.
From a process standpoint, tonight, what's in front of you is, do you want to sell it? And if so, what the process is. So it would either be you want to sell it and you want to do an alternative process and this is why. Or it would be, we want to sell it, we're gonna do sale to a butters and we're gonna follow the process in the ordinance. And let me just,
However, while you're looking at the ordinance, it's also important to remember, this is the public hearing. And we will have an item under new business where we council will get to discuss the particulars of the how, the do we want to and how do we want to, and so.
I just wanted to be clear that I didn't hear you, and I think I appreciate your argument. I think it's quite reasonable.
right, yeah, so that's why we would be encouraged for you guys, I guess, to do an alternative measure instead of doing with the two bids and everything.
Sandy, can you explain the relationship between the garage again in this property and whether the garage is constructed after you bought it?
No, the garage, because like there's 2 garages and they were both existing and everything when we purchased it through
Okay.
Vision Property and everything. And then the thing was, because we thought like it included that other piece and at one time it did. But Vision Property only bought that one parcel and not the other parcel. And then that's why we, even at the time when we were with Vision Property, we wanted to see, have them contact you guys, but then, like I said, they didn't and everything. Then we were told that we would be able to, once we had it in our possession, then we would be able to, to purchase it and stuff. That was probably like 5 years ago, but.
I think you mentioned that there's one pin and it also appears that the Young's property or building or something could be close as well.
So the hardest part about only having one pin is there's only one point of reference, right? And it's very difficult to understand where that goes. Obviously, with the front being 50 feet and the back being 62 feet, there's some angle somewhere, okay? How that goes, it's hard to tell. So from the pin, if you were to look back towards the road, depending upon where that line is, it could be very close to the Youngs. It could be less close to the Youngs. It's hard to tell.
So the pin is in the back.
The pin is in the back corner. Is the only one that we found. So it's like you said, it's hard to orient yourself to what that angle is and where that would go away from. And you can look here and it looks as though by the drawing, now we know these are not accurate. That's Google, is that it goes back at an angle, but what is that angle? And you can't tell that without it being surveyed.
So the bottom one is the Youngs, the top one is the Mitchells.
Can we see the Mitchell's garage on that picture?
Val, can you find me a view of the garage? Does it have a second driveway?
So the driveway, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a tree, there's a
Yeah,
driveway
yeah.
on one side and there's a driveway on the other side. There are, yeah, and then there's a garage with what you would call just a slant roof on the second side that has an existing garage, another garage door on it. And once again, looking at that, I don't know the distance where that would come, but if it does come in at all at an angle, you probably are gonna catch some of the corner of the garage based on where, eyeball. But I can't tell you that for sure, because I'm not a surveyor.
And I was off on the sale to a butter, not 60 days, 14, so. Still
So, again, we're still in public hearing, so questions or comments from staff or council or Mrs. Mitchell?
Yeah, this may be kind of a weird thing, like say for instance, say if the Youngs do have an interest, okay? And, okay, is there any way, this may sound kind of weird or whatever, is there any way to divide that parcel? I mean, just in case if they wanted some, and then, you know what I mean? So there wouldn't be like an argument or something like that to, like, because of our garage and our, with the tree and the entrance and stuff like
Good
that.
question.
Yeah, so my answer off the top of my head is that if it has been 15 years since we foreclosed, because that predates a change in law, then I think the town could do whatever it wanted. I do think it would cost us to set pins and do surveys, but that could be passed along. If it is not 15 years, the cost of clearing the title is not cheap. And I would suggest that we would want to maybe perhaps hold it, if that's where you guys wanted to go, perhaps hold it until we hit 15 years after we foreclose. So under state law, prior to a certain date, if a town held a parcel for 15 years, it didn't matter if they foreclosed on it incorrectly. The presumption is that the foreclosure was accurate and it clears the title and it allows you to do whatever you want with the property. If we don't have clear title to a property and we start getting in the middle of dividing it and selling it, we are asserting an ownership level that we may or may not have. And so we normally would simply take whatever interest we have and put it out there as a tax lien sale, which is why somebody can pick up a house for a fraction of its value. Because all we're saying is whatever interest we have, and we think we have interest, we're passing along to somebody. So now, more recent foreclosures have a 5-year window and not a 15-year window, but this one would most definitely follow.
Cindy, what is your plan for the parcel?
I guess but he wants to know what's our plan for the parcel.
Oh, we just want to be able to have our garage clear and where I mow it, without that piece of land that was part of our property. Property would look really not right, you know what I mean? It's have the second garage is right on the property. And there is a barn right in front of the tree. I want to let you know that. So I've had to almost hit it with a long one. I know somewhere there. I know you said something about you couldn't find it.
There's a pin.
There's a pin up, yeah, yeah. But anyway, it's just, and I was told when we first got the house from somebody from the city hall that was in violation with the town because we didn't have enough road frontage. Because of what happened back then, how we lost it. And they would never be able to give us a permit if we didn't do septic system or anything like that. But I guess that's changed now. That was from the old guy that retired. I think he was telling me that. We're gonna purchase the property. that we wouldn't be able to get a permit if we ever had to, because we don't have enough road frontage without having that other property that we're talking about.
You can't split it. You can't split the lot, but if you have a septic and you needed to fix a septic, you'd be able to. Do that.
Yeah, it wasn't this code officer, it was like when we,
One,
kind of a couple of years when we first bought it, because we've owned the property for about 11 years.
So I would say, I would challenge that, description of what's allowed and not allowed.
Okay, do we have any other questions on this item? Again, this is just a public hearing. There is an order on the new business when we'll take action. We're not taking action at this point. We all set?
But one other question, so we'll know, like, what, we'll be getting a letter too? And then-
You're gonna know in a little bit.
Mrs. Mitchell, later in this meeting, we take
Oh,
up
okay.
new business. There'll be an
Okay.
order that we'll
Okay.
discuss and try to sort it all out.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the end of our public hearings, and now we'll move on to acknowledgements by council members. And let's start on the right side tonight with Mr. Kenny.
I do not have any.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I walked in thinking I would simply just, talk about the things where many of us are gonna talk about the election, the efficiency fair on Saturday. But on the way in here, I was terrified and excited by the giant spider web outside public safety. So I'd like to acknowledge whatever fun festive folks in town government put that up. Because it scared me, but I like it.
So that is in preparation for Halloween Alley, which is
Okay.
part of the whole end of October community celebration.
All right, well, it was great and terrifying.
Sure.
Yes, and I saw Megan Marsala out there in the parking lot doing some more outlining. She's busy. Acknowledgements, we are in day 4 of our community build. And so I would like to acknowledge all of the people that have showed up to help us with this. We're doing window dressers. And so we're making window inserts for those people who don't know what's happening. I talked to a board member today of window dressers, and Orono is the first municipality to sponsor a window dressers, and at the first northern, she thinks Portland has actually done that. So it's us in Portland, who in the state, who has sponsored the window dressers. We have had staff, Nancy and her husband came in and helped us out. They did some volunteering, and Avi came in. We've had a couple professors from the University of Maine showed up yesterday. We had the whole Orono, not the whole, there were most of the Orono High School Environment Club showed up, and they were fun, and so they helped us out. We have until Thursday to get 204 inserts that we're building, and we have people are kind of walking in with something called rewraps, which is just they bought their windows before and they're asking us to wrap them again for a very minimal price. People are happy that they'll be saving some money this winter. So that was the whole point. Megan has been incredible. Megan and I spent all summer measuring people's windows. So now we are building them and throwing them up, but and hopefully we'll have them done by Thursday. So it's been a whirlwind week. But I'm very grateful for the people that have come in to help us out, and people that are helping us out without even having built window, like they're not ordering them, they're just walking in and helping us do it. And then we're just gearing up, or staff is gearing up for the efficiency fair on Saturday. That's getting a lot of press, and we have no idea what's going to happen, but I hope people come. So we've got about 16 vendors, and we've got some Efficiency Maine will be there. So if you have any, to the public, if you have any questions about solar, electricity, heat pumps, insulation, all that stuff that we're gonna be thinking about in about a month. Come on down to the fair and see what happens. We'll see what happens. I have no idea what's gonna happen. So that's it. And yes, and happy Halloween, everybody.
I'd like to acknowledge Sophie and her staff and Tom and the rest of you on council. In August and September, I had a family member who felt ill. It required that I be absent from a few meetings and check in with people by email rather than face to face. People were incredibly gracious, and I really appreciate the time. So thank you.
And I'm not sure if we've talked about this at a meeting already, but I would like to acknowledge town staff and everybody else involved in getting the lights back on the bridge. So appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy walking out there without the lights and seeing the stars, but I think the safety is probably more important. So I'm grateful. I'm sure everybody else is.
Had I known, that would have been mine.
Sonia, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I'm joining remotely today because I have a broken foot and I'm hobbling around on crutches. And so I have a newfound appreciation for accessibility related infrastructure and those like push buttons on the doors that open the doors and elevators. And I'm grateful for the folks who help to maintain those, that level of accessibility in our services.
I'd just like to acknowledge town staff. You probably haven't seen the 2021 town report that's coming out. I picked one up this afternoon. I think Nancy has some for the rest of you folks here tonight. Take a look at really well put together. I skimmed through it this afternoon and really enjoyed it. Last week, or maybe it was now 2 weeks ago, I attended the Maine Municipal Association Convention, was here in Bangor. Cheryl was there, Mitch was there for part of it, Chief Lowe ran a program there. Really good conference, and I think in the future, if any of you are able to get there for even part of a day, it's well worth the effort. It was really easy this year because it was in Bangor. They alternate between Bangor and Augusta. To save 3 hours of driving was a treat. And finally, I sadly would like to recognize the passing of David Decanage. David was a longtime police officer in Orono, spent over 20 years on our force, served as police chief here for 3 years, and has recently passed away. I was just notified today. And that's it for me. Yes.
Could I jump back on? You kind of spurred me. I want to acknowledge the passing of another longtime Orono resident, just a pillar of the community and someone that's going to be greatly missed by everyone. Really, Bob Cobb, passed a week or so, 2 weeks ago. Just a really good human. Yeah, someone we lost. So.
Glad you remember that. Unfinished business. I do not believe we have any. Consent agenda. Remember that we are taking off item 22-199. But I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Seconded.
I think we have one.
Yes,
We have a conflict on one.
I will be abstaining from voting on the consent agenda because my spouse works for one of the businesses being licensed.
Thank you for mentioning that.
But I would like to say that we also will be approving folks for many volunteer boards. And I want to thank those people. I wish I could vote for you,
So
but I can't.
Nancy doesn't ask for much, ever, and she's asking if we could pull the order with the conflict. She says it will make her record keeping much easier.
Oh,
So there,
okay.
and that is item
The OBC license. 22-187.
22-187 is coming off the consent agenda
And if we could do that one first, then 199, and then new business.
under new business. Okay. Everyone know what we're voting on?
Yes.
All those in favor of the approval of the consent agenda, and once again, we have to do the roll call.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor.
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Council Windor,
In favor.
Councilor Brett
In favor.
Councilor Kenny,
In favor.
and Council Morrow.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and then none opposed.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to new business, and we'll first take up order 22-187. Order approving a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirit liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualist license for Woodman's Brewing Company doing business as Orono Brewing Company, 61 Market Street. Could I have a motion to approve?
So.
Moved and second. Thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Let's have a vote.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
Abstain.
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Wingard,
In favor.
Councilor Brett,
In favor.
Councilor Kenny,
In favor.
and Council Morrow.
In favor.
And there is 6 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstention.
That worked
We
well.
did it.
Thank you for your suggestion on that, Nancy. Appreciate
And I
it.
have to remember not to sign that license.
Yes.
When it comes around.
If you do, we'll just put you in line.
Okay, get the white out.
Now we'll do order 22-199, order selecting Sebago Technics Incorporated of South Portland for professional services related to the Route 2 corridor transportation feasibility study. Authorizing the town manager to execute any agreement or other documentation necessary to support this cooperative planning project with the selected vendor, Maine Department of Education. Transportation, thank you. That was on the other page. And the town of Orono, and further to authorize the expenditure of funds from the awarded and previously accepted Planning Partnership Initiative Program grant for this purpose. So they,
Second.
thank you.
Yes, so last Tuesday, we received 2 responses to our request for qualifications for this planning partnership initiative project. SLR International and Sebago Technics. We scored them on Thursday, a group of 4, 3 staff members and the DOT planner. And we've chosen Sebago Technics as the most qualified firm to perform this pretty important project for us. We've had a great experience with Sebago Technics in the past, on a number of different both infrastructure and transportation related projects. And so we're looking forward to kicking this one off.
So the only thing I would add is that the number of people submitting for this is not surprising to us. Vendors have to be pre-qualified by the state in order to participate in this program. So there's a short list of people that would have been
And as
eligible.
far as planning projects go, this is a pretty big one. So with people as busy as they are, we weren't expecting a lot of responses anyway. So.
Can I ask, or can you disclose if there was a significant pricing difference?
So it's a qualification based process. So we don't know what, so once we chose Sebago Technics as the most qualified firm, we open a sealed envelope with their pricing in it. So since SLR was not chosen, that envelope is still sealed, and we'll be sending that back to them. So we don't know what the cost would have been. I will say the project came in at $125,000, which is where our budget was for this project. And like I said, DOT will be paying half of that.
This establishes kind of, as we work through this project, this is the qualification process that will likely carry through construction, correct? If we get that far.
No, the planning, so the planning phase of what could be the larger project is a standalone project. If the construction projects move forward, that will be a DOT administered project.
So it's not a nice project. Okay.
Okay, any questions, comments? No? Ready for a vote? Nancy? Roll call,
Council
please.
Perry, yes, Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner. In favor. Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Berthasell,
In favor.
Council Kenny,
In favor?
and Council Sarowitz.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you. So moving on to order 22-200, order determining that it is in the best interest of the town to dispose of property located on Essex Street, described in tax map lot 006-004-059, and further determining the method of said disposal. So we are going to need to make a motion to approve this, and then as we move forward, amendment to that motion.
So the amendment would be either you think it's a good idea or not. If you don't think it's a good idea, then you would just vote this down or make a motion and let it die on the table, right? One of the two.
No.
Get out your Robert's
But
rules.
the amendment comes in with regard to the method.
Correct.
But
Correct.
not to the motion.
No, I mean, the motion is that you would determine it is in the best interest. for
So
the
I
motion.
move that it is in the best interest of the town to dispose of this property.
And I second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? So now, before voting on that motion, we would need to add an amendment to it to determine the method by which we would dispose of the land.
Yes.
Would anybody like to propose an amendment?
I guess I propose that we go with the method of butters. I really appreciate everything you've had to say and I agree with what you're saying. But not knowing whether someone else's building could be over a line. And they've been notified, but I don't think they have been notified. And that seems, I don't know how that works, but I mean, we did everything we could. There's a good chance they don't know that this is happening. And I think we need to make an effort to just make sure all parties.
So I would like to second that motion, right?
Yeah.
So for the purposes of discussion,
So the amendment.
the amendment to the motion, so that we may discuss it. Yes, is this correct? This is correct,
Good.
right? Okay, great.
So further discussion on the proposed amendment.
So,
One second.
go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
Can you just clarify for me? Should in a butters sale be accepted by the council, that is a 2-week, we would be. This would be a 2-week window, right?
Yeah, so by practice, it turns into 4 weeks because you won't come back together for 4 weeks, but it will take, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of digging to figure out where I can come up with a better address for these people. And get the notices out, and then they would have 2 weeks to submit. If it's only one that we get back, that's easy. If there are 2, then I bring both of them to you.
So it's 2 weeks from the receipt of the certified.
yeah.
We must
2
have
weeks
sent them
from
a
the
tax.
date.
We must have sent them a tax bill.
Yeah, my guess is it's probably in the staff is working through to get back out. It went to Levant,
Oh.
and that's the only address we have on record for them. So we can do a little bit more digging. And it took a long time for it to come back. So. Oh, yes, yeah, it's paid by the mortgage holder, that's why. So, I would say. I would expect to have answers for you if you went this week by the November. Council.
I'm good with that.
Further comments?
I would just say that when we first discussed this a couple of weeks ago, I was very strongly leaning towards just wanting to work with the one with the Mitchells, because it seemed to be a very strong case that there was part of a garage and a driveway on this property, but in absence of that, it surprises me to also hear that the Young's house is somewhat close to that same property line. And if our goal legally, our legal obligation is to avoid the appearance of sort of making deals and we should be opening this up fairly. I am more inclined now to work through the abutter sale bid process because it seems like we don't have enough information. And I'm concerned that the abutters haven't been given appropriate notice for this hearing.
Thank you. So how do we dispose of the property that we don't know the boundaries of? Like, if I were to, maybe I don't know, if I were to buy a house,
Good question.
it would be surveyed as part of the deal, right?
So we ran into this, Leo. A tax acquired sale is much different than when you go to buy a home. So we are not selling the property per se. We are selling our interest in the property. In good faith, we believe that we have purchased the property. So you go back to the original, what you get is not a meets and bounds deed from us. You get a municipal quitclaim deed that is releasing our interest to you. Then it's your job to, if you wish to clear the title of it, you need to go through that process. So towns very rarely go through the process of cleaning titles. It can be very expensive and involve other pieces. So that is what you get essentially is, here's the property, the meets and bounds are listed in the registry of deeds. What we're saying is, we believe we own it. We're releasing any of our interests to you for a price, which is why we would never expect to get a market price for a piece of property, because we're not selling it on the same terms as the market. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And it would only be incumbent on the purchaser to do that if they intended to resell it or they intended to improve the property.
Yep.
Okay, so they can just own it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item? We ready for a vote? So we are voting on the main motion as amended.
Did we vote on the amendment?
Okay, we didn't vote on the amendment.
Didn't vote
You're
on the
right. You
amendment.
got to vote on the amendment first, and then the main motion is amended.
Okay,
So Nancy, we have roll call vote on the amendment.
And could you just repeat exactly what we're voting on again?
Did you get that down, Nancy, the amendments?
Well, that,
You
going to
got
sell,
mixed in discussion with my.
so the,
just the sell to be about.
yeah, so what you would be saying if it's official, it would be an order determining. An order determining that it is in the best interest of the town to dispose of property located on Essex Street described as tax map lot 006-004-59, and further determining that this disposal be made through sale to abutters as, you know, pursuant to section 2-150.
So now I'm confused.
So we're voting on the amended motion, yes, no to this amended motion, and then we will vote on like passing that motion or not. Yes, is that right?
You think
Did
I'm
I get that right?
I can hear if you think I'm wrong.
I do, that's all right. I think we should vote on the amendment and then vote on the amended motion.
Okay, so what you're saying is the amendment is
The
instead
amendment
of,
that was proposed by Leo is what we vote on first. And then if that passes, we vote on the motion as amended.
so the amendment is to line out determining the method of said disposal and substitute and further, what did you say? You just read it in my
Well,
ear. And further
Further
determining,
to sell for sale for buyers.
there we go.
Determining the sell through sale to butters
Okay.
is the key to the amendment.
Government's hard.
Okay, so we're only voting on the amendment right now,
Okay,
and that is sale to butters.
So Nancy, roll call, please.
Counselor Fair,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor.
Counselor Robinson,
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
Counselor Berthasell,
In favor.
Counselor Kenny,
In favor?
Counselor Marley,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you. And now we are going to vote on the motion as properly amended. We all care what we're voting on now?
Yes.
And can I just say before we do that, again, I really appreciate the Mitchells for coming in here and
Yeah.
getting your perspective on this. And though I do believe you have a very strong claim, I do also agree with the fact, as per my vote for the amendment, that it is in best interest of our town that we do take steps to make sure that we're being fair. But thank you for coming in.
Can I ask one question? Like after you guys vote and stuff, and or the 2-week process, if the Youngs don't have any interest, and then we would just be able to just, you tell us like the price that you guys have it for, and then we'd be able to.
No, the process includes putting a price down for what you would pay for it, and that's what we would sell it for. And if the council felt like it was fair.
So you would give us the amount that you think is fair, and then we would approve that amount. We do.
Okay, so you wouldn't give us the amount?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay.
How would you know who would determine and buy it? How would that work?
I think we would probably get the amounts from both the butters, assuming the Youngs also gave an
You
amount.
don't go back and forth, though?
No.
Just one time deal.
One time.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, and then if they have no interest,
You'd be the only bidder.
it would be the
Yeah.
only bidder,
Correct.
but that doesn't mean that you would accept it.
Yeah.
It would be unusual that we did.
Oh, okay, oh, okay, all right,
That
okay.
was like a 10 cents or
Right, well, no, right,
something
okay.
ridiculous.
Oh, okay, all right, okay,
Thanks again so much for.
all right, thank you.
Nancy, we are voting on the main motion now.
Counselor Fair,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor.
Counselor Robinson,
In favor.
Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
Counselor Berthasell,
In favor.
Counselor Kenny,
In favor.
and Counselor Marley,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor and none opposed.
Yes. Cut through that. Okay, now we are doing order 22-201. Order approving ordinance amendments to the Town of Orono Code of Ordinances, Chapter 18, Land Use, Section 18-31, Definition, Section 18-106, Schedule of Uses, Section 18-131, Home Occupations, to amend zoning and performance standards for homestays. An item we have discussed a number of times.
Move approval. Second.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Kyle.
Okay, great. So yeah, as mentioned, this has been through planning board and council public hearings and was up for adoption at council. Went back for discussion at the committee level through that process. The ordinance language overall remained the same, except we did adjust the definition in that language for owner occupancy, the second half of that language based on some comments there. But in principle, the general language remained the same, where this would be expanding on our existing definition of homestays to not only include owner occupied single family homes as being eligible for homestays, this type of, travelers lodging short-term rental, expanding that to non-owner occupied dwellings as well, and creating zoning for that process. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but yeah, I think we've been over this several times now.
Questions from council
No questions, but
or comments?
some comments. It's going to be probably a reiteration of what I've already made, but it was suggested that the goal of this was to do this with the lightest touch to our current ordinances to allow for practice that's happening. But I really think, again, this is anything but the lightest touch. The background material suggests that homestays were becoming increasingly popular as well. But I don't think that's accurate based on our current definition of homestays, which requires the owner of the property sharing a room in their home. So certainly short-term rentals have probably increased, but haven't seen any evidence that actual homestays as we define them today are. Which, and again, how we define them today is the actual standard definition, which requires it to be someone sharing their home. So this new proposal is requiring us to create a completely new, what I call non-conforming definition of homestay. I've said it before, but I really truly believe it. And I think it's bad policy when we're requiring a definition that is different from the standard. I also mentioned briefly, but I want to touch on it again, that really pointing out that the current homestay ordinance, in my opinion, is actually could be considered, I think, a discriminatory ordinance against low-income individuals. So really, rather than expanding homestay and adding a homestay to, we should probably be looking at removing homestay entirely from the land use ordinance, in my opinion, and leaving short-term rentals in our rental registration program, which was 100% developed for overseeing rentals. So the ability to manage complaints, registration, inspection, etc. You can look at our town map and see where every rental is in town. We added all we'd have to do is add a color, and you can see where every short-term rental is. But back to the discrimination policy, my point is, I would argue that someone looking to rent a room to a stranger to share their bedroom or their bathroom, kitchen, whatever, is probably doing so to make ends meet. Maybe to help with taxes, increased heating bills, whatever it may be. I don't think you're going to find somebody that's well off renting a room in their house. So again, I think it's an equity issue. We talk a lot about equity. I think we have an opportunity to actually get a discriminatory ordinance off our books. And lastly, I guess I'd add, I think at this table, I know some have had rentals, but I think I'm the only one that's actually used this program since its inception.
Incorrect.
You're using it?
Not now, but I have.
Okay. Which is interesting, because we do have people that own properties, but not in this town. So they're not, or they don't, there's not even a rental program. But I've used it, and it's a pretty easy, I've used it for short-term and long-term. Because it, again, I believe it's a legitimate, I believe it already is a legitimate use. We can make it a legitimate use with a box that says, ask the question, are you using this in short-term? And it's right in the rental registration. These are rentals. So I want to encourage my fellow board members to vote against this policy. That's it.
Thank you, Leah. Other comments, questions? I am going to vote in favor of this policy, although I do appreciate the issues that Leo has brought up at several of our meetings. And I hope that we can revisit this policy in a year and determine if it's working the way we anticipated it working, whether it needs to be adjusted, modified. Anything else? We're ready for a vote. Nancy, roll call, please.
Council Berry,
In favor.
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
Not in favor.
Council Brook itself.
Abstain.
Oh, abstain. Council Kenny
Not in favor.
and Council Lawler.
In favor.
Yes. Okay, so the vote is 4 in favor. There were 2 opposed and 1 abstention.
So the motion passes. Okay. Moving on to order 22-202, authorizing the town manager to purchase 2 redundant servers with Microsoft Server 2022 and 85 client access licenses at a cost not to exceed $15,045.29 from Dell Computer, with funds drawn from the IT Audio Vision Reserve.
Move approval?
Second.
Sophie, is this you or?
This is Belle. She's
Oh,
even up.
Belle. Hey, Belle.
Good evening, Belle Ryder, Assistant Town Manager. The town's existing server is 9 years old, and it houses critical software for the town. When I first got here, we had 4 physical servers, and we have transitioned a significant amount of our activity to the cloud, but we haven't transitioned everything. And in fact, even the future web version of Trio may require a server. So our server is at the, well, actually kind of well beyond the useful life. The operating software that it is using, Windows Server 2012, the extended support for that ends in 2023. And our existing server really doesn't have the capacity to properly run Windows 2022, which would be the current server version. I went out, I asked for 3 different quotes, one from a local vendor, one from Dell, and one from Lenovo. Dell was the lowest cost by $6,000 and has the appropriate specs and newer processors than some of the other quotes that we saw. So we're recommending that we purchase these 2 servers from Dell. The purpose of having the 2 is that we would have one located in our IT closet and one physically distanced from that, so that if we had a flood in the IT closet because the sprinklers failed or the building collapsed or whatever, we would have a second physical server that would allow us to continue operating.
Thank you, Belle. Any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none.
Council Berry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor.
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Councilman Darby,
In favor.
Council Bertha,
In favor.
Council Kenny,
In favor.
Council Waller,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you. Order 22-203. Order authorizing the town manager to purchase hazmat area monitoring equipment at a price not to exceed $88,000 with the awarded and previously accepted Homeland Security grant with the required local match funded through hazmat reserve funds. And this order needs to be amended.
It does, and I've made a proposed amendment. So when we wrote this order, we had not heard from the final quote that we had, that Kevin had solicited, that Deputy Chief Sirlaw had solicited. He worked late into Friday, so Friday night, as I was writing this background, I had the information, so we would want to amend it. We are recommending that we amend it to say that you're authorizing me to purchase area array hazmat monitoring equipment from Safeware of Landham, Maryland, at a price not to exceed $85,193 with awarded and previously accepted Homeland Security grants. The PCM EMA is there for staff to know which one of the various grants we're talking about, with a local match of up to $15,750. So when we originally came to you, we thought it would be a $15,000 match. It looks like we're going to be $730 over budget. I'm asking for a $20 price just in case we have something. But yes, Kevin came to you earlier this year and told you all the reasons why we wanted to apply for the money. Did a great job twisting the local EMA, Emergency Management Agency, into giving it to us. The match from council was greatly appreciated and what eventually cleared it from the edge, but I would just want to recognize Kevin, who's just done a phenomenal job getting this safety equipment for us.
How do we move this?
So is this another? We move the motion, then we amend the motion, then we approve the amended motion.
Yes.
Well, it's just complicated.
I've been awake since.
So we now need a motion to approve order 22-203.
I move that we approve 22.
I second that.
All right. And now, are we clear on? I propose the amendment as described by the town manager. And we're clear on that? So we're gonna vote on the amendment, which changes the amount of money and identifies the vendor we're gonna be purchasing from.
Before we get to the vote, could I just ask a quick follow-up question? My apologies, if I was on council at the point in time when this was discussed, I've lost track of exactly what this was. Can you remind me what this, what sort of safety issue this surveillance technology is solving, and just a little bit more about why this was recommended? It doesn't need to be a lengthy description, but I'd love a quick recap on what the issue was.
So our department, being the area hazmat team, we actually have area monitoring equipment, and we actually had some older equipment that was no longer in use. So we couldn't actually monitor air quality remotely. And we have just been able to have our current meters that are kind of, when we're in one location, we can monitor the air. So this equipment and the ability to put in for Homeland Security funds to purchase this area monitoring equipment that's actually used by other area departments, and the CST, the civil support team that assists us, we can integrate with them and use these same monitors and meters when we're doing events such as the standby at the graduation ceremonies. So this was a great opportunity. We were able to work with Penobscot County EMA to try to secure some funds. The county commissioners originally approved it, and it went forward to MEMA, and MEMA put it in through Homeland Security funds. We then were given the approval that we had actually got the grant. They have a different period where they are able to give the funds out, the federal government, so we had to wait until October until the contract was given down to the state level. And that's where we were earlier this month, and we got the approval to go ahead and purchase. And that's why we're here today, is to ask council to approve the purchase of this equipment.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other questions? Okay, we're voting on the amendment. Please.
Sorry. Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Berthasell,
Abstain.
Council Kenny,
In favor.
Council Laurel.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor, and there were none opposed and 1 abstention.
And now we're voting on the main motion as amended, the whole package.
Okay. Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
Yes, in favor.
Council Wingard,
In favor.
Council Berthasell,
Abstain.
Council Kenny,
In favor.
and Council Laurel.
In favor.
And the vote on the motion as amended is 6 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That is the end of our new business, unless I am mistaken.
That's it.
So we will move on to council representative reports from committees that have met since our last formal meeting. And I will do finance and operations. We met twice on September 19th. We met and we had our first discussion on the request to sell the parcel of land on Essex Street, which we have dealt with tonight. And on October 3rd, we met And the only item on finance and operations was changes in parking enforcement practices.
And that item that we keep saying we'll talk about.
Well, yes.
Megan, did you have?
Yes, I have 2 meetings worth of comp plan implementation committee reports. On September 19th, we discussed the proposed contract zone for 74 Mill Street, the Buyer Factory. And we moved that onto the planning board. We also discussed the language revision to the short-term rental that we just passed. So don't go into detail on that. And then we also met on October 3rd, and we discussed the planning board report and next steps for the proposed parking ordinance revision, reducing the minimum parking standards. So we wanted to put that out. We decided we wanted to put that to a public hearing.
Thank you.
Community development has met twice, however, I was only in attendance for one of those meetings. We met at the end of September to discuss library foundation updates, which was a very fruitful meeting. And then there was a meeting that I was not able to attend. I'm not sure who ran that. But thank you very much. That was on the agenda was Demi, and also discussion of the process of selecting membership to the town advisory committee on DEI. Yeah. So I'm sure those were fruitful discussions. Anyway.
It all got sent back to staff, and I will send it all back out to the council shortly.
Environment committee actually hasn't met, so we've just been kind of rocking and rolling with what we're doing. We do have there was a subcommittee. So the subcommittee has met with Bella and Megan. And I also wanted to kind of add to this. So we have a Penobscot Region Climate Action and Penobscot Region committee that is starting to convene. And I am on the advisory committee. So we had the very first advisory meeting in between wherever we are right now. And that won't meet again, that committee won't meet again until December or maybe January, actually, 2023. So the Penobscot Region Climate Action Plan is starting to come together. And we have a lot of people on staff who are part of that group. So, and nothing was decided. It was just an intro meeting for everybody.
Okay. And future agenda items of concern. Anybody have it?
I do. I'm wondering if this council should have or should take some, if nothing else, maybe have some conversations around the home unhoused, I guess is the proper term these days. You know, it's hard to read, and I don't read the Bangor Daily much, but occasionally, and then the free one that comes. There's a lot of talk of it. I think they're our neighbor. It's Penobscot County. So I'm just curious how we feel as a council, if that's something. It's nice to be insulated and isolated, like I kind of feel that we are, but it's 7 miles down the road. And their service center, I don't know what the proper channel or discussion for us is, but.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So I'm reading between a lot of lines here, and if I'm wrong, just tell me. But are you suggesting that you'd like the council to talk about whether or not we should be pushing Penobscot County to take a more active role in what is happening in Bangor? Or are you suggesting that you as a council want to talk about what's happening in Bangor?
Yes, I don't know. I think both of those are potential outcomes. I don't know what our role. I'm curious. Thoughts on we should have a role.
I could see an absolute role in the town council having a discussion about homelessness being a county and state issue that, while not directly impacting our services and our service delivery here, that we see the problem that the city of Bangor is having, and perhaps reaching out to the city of Bangor to see if there is a political avenue for us to leverage support and discussion from the county commissioners. I could see that. I think, you know, that adage of good fences make good neighbors, you know, the boundary issue is important. The city staff has had multiple conversations with the city of Bangor about what the town might be able to do to assist. So they know that we are open to that conversation. I think part of what has made the Bangor-Orono relationship work very well in the past is that understanding the municipal boundary. But if we're saying, hey, look, the city of Bangor is really struggling with an issue that is bigger than the city of Bangor, I don't even know if it needs to be a big council discussion. Staff, if I knew that that's where council wanted me to go, I could push harder than I already have pushed.
To be candid, that's kind of what I had in mind, was that there would be some level of coordination to reach out to Penobscot County commissions.
So I understand that's a desire council has. I'm not seeing anybody do no. So how about I reach out to the city of Bangor and see what the best way to be supportive of what they're doing in that might be. Would that work for folks? Okay.
Thank you.
Before all the money is done.
Thanks for reading between those lines. that I didn't really define very well.
I
to the
try.
master.
Anything else under this topic? Items of concern? Future agenda items? Public petitions, I believe we do not have any public petitions. Public,
Can we push this one to the end and do the workshop? And then come back and do the executive session?
sure,
Would that be okay?
I didn't, public comments,
Oh, I'm sorry.
didn't do.
I thought you were talking about pushing public comments.
No,
and I was
I'm
like,
sorry, I
Why?
didn't-
Just make
We
people
didn't
wait
have to
around for us to
public.
do a workshop?
She just sounded like public.
We don't have any public comments from the virtual audience.
Nothing out here.
Okay, thank you. So what you would like to do is go right to the workshop.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
people gathering out there.
Yep. Good.
Snacks.
Yeah, snacks are in the other room. I'm wondering if Lori and Kevin can help. Maybe take us a couple of minutes to transition and use this. So I'm gonna mute this for just a minute. We'll be right back, Belle.
Good. So this is a workshop on community facility assessment, update and opportunities for feedback. We have a number of guests here to help us with that.
We do. Thank you for having us. My name is Chris Snowdeal. I'm a project manager with Yale Ward. And as most of you know, the town has hired us to assist you folks with a community needs assessment for properties specifically. So today, we're just going to give you an update of what we've done so far, the information we've gathered, and what the next steps are. And we're going to solicit hopefully a little bit of feedback from you, because we had a couple of conversations that didn't go like we thought they should. And we want to pursue that a little more. Great, but we just want your permission to do so. Again, my name is Chris Snowdeal. We also have Matt Carter with us. Matt?
Yeah, so, I'm an architect at Haley Ward and also a project manager as well. And I've been doing a lot of the programming aspects of this. A lot of it is about talking with people about buildings and what their uses can be and should be. So that's what I've been doing.
Hi, I'm Jessie Pottle. I'm the marketing director at Haley Ward, and I also help out on some of these types of projects when there's a lot of community engagement, stakeholder engagement, because that's part of my background.
Perfect. And I'm sorry, I haven't met most of you, so if you wouldn't mind, just getting names of each of you. As you're stuffing your face. We're starting on the other side.
No, my name's Leo Kenny.
Leo.
Megan Gardner.
Tom Perry.
You know, Megan Roberts.
Yep, regard.
Rob Laraway.
All right, thank you.
And Sonia Zon.
Hi.
Chris, can I just quickly just explain the staff structure to this? You've explained your structure.
Sure.
So Lori, who is graciously not at the management table, Mitch, Megan, and Jeff Wingart are the town team here. Jeff has been gracious enough to be the face in the public of the town. And Megan has accompanied the Haley Ward team on most of the stakeholder meetings. And Mitch, I think, joined in. So that's the town team. Now, go on.
Thank you. So just quickly, the handouts I gave you match what's going to be on the screen here. Quickly, the agenda. We've held a couple of community conversations. We're going to just quickly review those. We've held a number of stakeholder sessions with tenants and RSU 26 and the University of Maine. From that, we've gotten some themes and takeaways. And then we're going to just review what's next and open it up for questions if you have them at the end. Hopefully, don't take up too much time. You do this pretty quickly. We know you've had a long day already. So like I mentioned, we've had 2 community conversations. The first one was in person on July 20th here. We had about 31 residents show up for that, a pretty good turnout. Some people weren't aware of it. Some people asked if we could have a virtual session. So we ended up adding a second session that was virtual. Not very well attended, unfortunately. We didn't get a lot of extra feedback for that meeting. We did, though, in the in-person meeting, get a lot of community feedback. It was a pretty long meeting, couple hours. And interesting, well, we'll get into the details of those in a minute. So we reviewed the current uses with the community. Jeff did a good job explaining what the current uses were. And then we solicited some needs and wants from the community members in that meeting.
I think it was still.
Interesting.
Oh,
I think Belle's doing that.
oh, maybe that's why.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I might just need a little bit of a cue since we haven't practiced this together.
So next, Matt's just going to generally review what the themes of those conversations were.
So the themes of the conversation, it revolved around 2 things. One was the 4 buildings we're talking about and what they're used for now, because people want to talk about what they know. And then the other thing I think is driven by Orono and the people who are here and the presence of the university and some of those things. So there were a lot of ideas about the arts, and by that I mean there were some that were about art display or production, but also some that were about acting or singing or those sorts of things. There was a lot of community stuff, like, you know, could we have a community center here or a teen center and things like that. There were some ideas about ways to make the buildings more green and more environmentally friendly. There were ideas about sort of one-off events that could happen there. There were, again, among the people who are occupying the buildings, there were ideas about ways to improve the office space that they're occupying. Accessibility is one of the things that's there. People who were interested in doing programs of various kind, recreational. The scouts showed up at the meeting in their uniforms, and there were a lot of them. So scouting was an important part. They were very concerned about their access to the building they currently use. They've said that at every step along the way. But there was also some ideas for seniors, how they could use it. And then everybody needs storage. Every place needs an attic. So that's another thing. And then youth programs, that came up several times.
And just to add to that, I don't know how many attended that public meeting. I see a few faces that I recognize every year, but it started out as a conversation of what it used to be. And we tried to get people to think, well, what it could be. Things change, people change, people move out, people come in. So we tried to get people to think about what it could be and not what it was. But that seems to be the theme early on was, oh, it used to be this, it used to be that. Well, that's okay, but what could it be used for now? And we got some new information, but not a lot. It's still generally about what it used to be used for.
Next page, Val.
Thank you. So next we held some tenant meetings. And this is the current tenants of the buildings. We held those on September 20th. It was a pretty long day for us. Started pretty early at 9 and finished at 4, but we gathered a lot of good information from the current tenants. Most of them on September 20th. We had one, which was the Boy Scouts, which was last week at the old fire station. Then we met with the University of Maine on September 29th and RSU 26 on October 13th. And we'll get to some of those conversations that we're having.
So, yeah, already there. So, there were two of the buildings that were actually used quite a bit, or it's important to make a distinction. All of these buildings were used at one level before the pandemic and then another level after the pandemic, and then usage is starting to ramp up now that people are more willing to congregate and be in a group. The Keith Anderson building is not being used very hard right now. Parks and Rec used to do some programs in there. They do some low-cost rental for residents, one-off things, but not a lot of it since the pandemic. Parks and Rec also, it's one of their primary storage spaces. And then the Orono Land Trust is in there. And the Friends of the Orono Public Library put together their and organized their donations for the book sale.
I'd like to point out that all those tenants appreciated the space they had. None of them were squabbling.
Yeah, nobody wanted to leave.
Yeah, they were good with the space they had. Friends of the library would they have to move the books upstairs for the library sale, and that's one, it's tough to get the books up there, and two, it does limit the occupants that can sometimes go up there because it's not truly accessible if the elevator doesn't work.
It's also an important point to make. A lot of people had fond memories of activities they had done in this building at different times. Like I took a karate class, or I learned to contra dance, or whatever the kind of things that you do in a rental space like that. So this building is kind of beloved, even though there are some challenges.
And we heard about the challenges.
Yes, we heard about those.
Which is mostly accessibility.
Accessibility, and also it has no land that goes with it. So it's the lot lines are basically.
Next, we met with the folks at Brook Street School. Actually, not next, we kind of jumped around between buildings, but we summarized Brook Street School here. Orono Historical Society currently is housed there. They mostly use the space for storage and sorting and organizing the artifacts that they have. They don't really have any storage space there. So that's one of the things that they would like to have is some storage space. It doesn't even necessarily have to be there. We actually brought it up at the meeting at RSU 26, where they have space to maybe put up a cabinet and show some artifacts there, and they were receptive to that, open to that. The Orono thrift shop is probably the most used tenant that's there. They are on the second floor. It's chock full, not a lot of room to move around, and of course, it's not ADA accessible. But they do get pretty busy over the weekends when they're open. They also have a small storage building outside where they store some medical equipment, whether it be wheelchairs or crutches for the general public to use. Not only for Orono, sounds like they'll service anyone in the local area with that equipment. The Orono Community Garden is outside. They grow vegetables throughout the season and then prep those vegetables sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes even outside. The Housing Foundation, they're not housed in the building, but they do use the kitchen a little bit, but they mostly distribute their meals from the community room.
That's another thing that changed pre and post pandemic. They used to actually have sit down meals there, and now
They also held some vaccination clinics there as well. They did mention they would like to open back up to have meals at the community center again. And then Parks and Rec, they have some minimum storage in the basement, as do I think a lot of these uses. But it's not great for storage. It's kind of damp and wet. So it's not great for storage, but it's not bad, kind of inert plasticky type of things.
So this is also a space that we rent as well.
Yes.
that we're-
There's also rental space in Keith Anderson building. According to Megan, Brook Street, she shows them both. Brook Street, they typically like better, so a little bigger room, tempered a little better, just a little bit better space, ADA accessible, at least on the main floor.
that building, Bird Street, has the most intense use of all the buildings we've looked at. It's still used, even after the pandemic, it's used more than the other ones.
I think from a staff perspective, the reason that we added this to the list, even though it was not the question of how, like it's not being used, what should we use it for? This was more on the list for, I think it has reached its capacity. It is not likely following code. And what we know is that people on the second floor, people that are looking to use the second floor on a regular basis, struggle with the stairs. And so if we're looking at all the buildings, this one looked like one that we should be looking at for, does it really meet the need for what we have there?
There's an elevator.
No, there is not, there's no.
There's been an ongoing project to save for one and buy one, and that it has never worked out. The other uses for the funding come up.
And there are some, it's well used, it's popular, because it's kind of central to town next to the library, but parking is also could be an issue if there's a bunch of things happening at the same time locally.
The other thing I would say is, when we talk about tenants, the tenants that we talk about in the Birch Street School and in the Keith Anderson House are also groups that are central to services that the town is providing. The town is trying, or isn't trying, the town works with the community garden on programming, with the Housing Foundation, which the community garden helps. It is a very integrated group, and a lot of municipal services are being leveraged there for.
And frankly, providing space for these groups is a way that you help support them. So, yeah. The old fire station is actually one of the most interesting buildings. One of the things that when we went in the building, we learned that basically that building has the history of scouting in it. And here But also, it's basically been in service as a scout building for most of the time that scouting has been in business. So the scouts, they had a large turnout at the first community conversation, and also frankly, a pretty large turnout at this building tour. The building is beautiful. It's uninhabitable, and by uninhabitable, we say it doesn't have restrooms and it is not currently heated. Other than that, it's in pretty good. Let's put it this way. I was talking with my wife about it, and she said, "Why can't they occupy?" And I said, "Well, because it's not habitable." She said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, there's no heat." She said, "Well, they'd be cold." But whatever. It could be pretty usable. The scouts have, although their interest in it may have changed over time, they're definitely interested in being involved in fixing up this building and owning it if they possibly can. So, and they're ready to participate in that activity. That said, it hasn't really been defined, and one of the things they were asking us at the group hasn't really been defined what needs to happen to the building. There may be a lot of things, there may not be a lot. It needs to be reviewed. But they currently using, it's full of their stuff, yeah.
So they're not holding meetings,
Yeah.
so that
And they had it for some time.
they haven't, they went up to the American Legion. So 3 years ago, it was prior to the pandemic, we got a complaint because the chimney was starting to fall. And when we tried to kind of reach out to the Boy Scouts to see about getting it fixed, because all I knew was that we had a 99-year lease with the Boy Scouts. So the only real interaction I had with this old fire station was when the insurance company came and I checked off that it had a lease. Tried to find the lease and we couldn't. Went to the registry where a 99-year lease should be put on file, is not. Normally in a 99-year lease, something of that nature, it's kind of ownership without ownership. So the tenant's supposed to take care of it. And when the chimney started falling apart, we couldn't kind of get through the maze of the Boy Scouts to get it fixed. So we stepped in because it was a hazard and we owned the building. And we paid a contractor to come in and take the chimney to the roof line, cap it. When that happened, we also got into the basement and saw a completely rusted out fuel tank. As soon as we saw that, we couldn't let it sit. So we absorbed the cost of pumping the oil, disposing of the tank. As soon as we disposed of the chimney and the tank, we had to take out the heating, the furnace. So when all of that happened, we started to embark on conversations with the Boy Scouts about, and their leadership about, are you going to fix it? Are we, where are we with this? And then the pandemic hit and we just kind of all went into limbo. But the message that we had received through staff that is no longer on staff, is that they were not in a position to be able to care for a building if they were going to look elsewhere. So we're kind of at I'm not sure which it kind of is and how we want to.
I think their attitude has, I mean, it's different than it may have been at that time.
I don't disagree, but I don't know what they have for financial capacity.
Well, they're pretty cagey. They don't share it either.
Yeah. So I mean, that's for you guys to decide. That's what we heard
Yeah.
a number of times. We met with them last week. We'd like to have this building. Of course, they said after it's fixed. So,
The building itself, there was some misunderstandings on the building's on the register, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do with it. I think they had beliefs that, that it couldn't be used for anything other than a fire station, which is not true. The National Register process, you can still do whatever you want with your building. It really just is, if you're spending government funds or things on that, of that nature, it makes a difference, but that's even federal government funds, it's not necessarily local government, so. Anyway,
Okay, next is the former public works building. Currently not in use. There is a VRAP for the site, and basically that means there's some protection there that you can use it for other uses other than what it was used for. We did get some ideas from the community on recreation. We actually had one comment on, developing the site into storage units, more housing, entertainment venue, a number of different things for that site. Other than that, there's not a lot there. The building is pretty old. It's probably seen its better days. Some of it's a little better than others. Could it be salvaged? Maybe, but it would take a fair amount of work to get it cleaned up and usable for something for the community.
so, the other thing we did was we talked to some other groups, that are in the community about how they figure into this puzzle of, spaces in the community, space availability, and whether they need space or whether they have space to offer. The first one we talked to was the University of Maine. We sat down with them and just talked about what their attitude is about, what they have for spaces, how they go about sharing them. They were pretty clear that priority goes to UMaine students first, which that makes sense. And that would make it difficult to, but not impossible, to secure space for Orono programs. There is a.
That probably should say regular, like regular
Yeah,
scheduled
right.
programs.
Yeah. There's a procedure. There's a list of rooms that we're actually in the process of getting. And then there's also a way that that some of the students at the school they've done some studies. They did a study for the Keith Anderson building about how that could be used. There are some teaching moments for them in these buildings potentially. So yeah, it was kind of, I think they have space. I think it will be a challenge to find a way to make it, if you want to use it on a regular basis, that, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, what it sounds like.
So I will tell you that staff continues to try to leverage, and we're making our way up the hierarchy. We only have a couple more steps before I think we reach the president's office. Around some space. And I know that one of the groups you met with was Campus Recreation, that we have a very strong relationship with. It's very clear that the university has kind of their own cost centers, and each of those cost centers need to balance. So we've actually moved beyond Campus Recreation to find some recreation space on campus. I don't know. We kind of passed the Hail Mary for basketball, and are trying to leverage that. But yeah, I think that's the key. When you don't have assets, you're now relying on other people's assets.
Right, and also I got the sense that they're not going to donate it, you're going to pay.
Yeah.
So,
And I think there are folks here that work at the university and work with the university, but there are lots of hands and they don't always communicate
yeah,
together.
What?
And so trying.
That's not my experience.
Trying to have those, who controls this space does not necessarily talk to some of the other people that you have to get to. So there's a process that we're going through and we're trying very hard to make this.
We only had 30 minutes to speak with these folks, and one of them seems to be the scheduler of all the facilities other than rec, maybe even rec. But you can ask him for it, then he has to go talk to this other entity to figure out if it's already being used, how much it is, and it just seemed to be kind of a bureaucracy, I think.
They need an app for that.
They didn't after that.
They need an app.
Can I just ask, sorry, I can't multitask, and I started signing this, what is their project proposal? I don't think,
So
this was just
Rich-
meeting with them to talk about their
No.
space?
So, do you mind? So Matt had mentioned the study by the students. And the bear hive was something that came out of that study at the Keith Anderson building to bring community and students together.
So
This is a possible use for Keith Anderson.
this is a study that a summer program did. This is what came up during your stakeholder.
This came up, it did come, yeah, it was during, we have the full presentation and we're gonna share that as part of our final report. We're gonna share all this information we've gathered as part of our final report, and that's in there. It's not a lot of information.
Right.
But that's generally.
Context.
That's okay.
So,
It's students brainstorming an idea of how to use a building that will build community.
It was what I found, so it's, it's a potential business incubator and a co-working space, and I liked that, just my perspective. I think we heard a lot of people who were very involved with the seniors and maybe disadvantaged people and the youth and things, and then this was a perspective of maybe more of like an economic development tool for the town, which we didn't hear a lot in the community conversation or in the community conversations.
For the tenant.
Yeah, the tenant meetings.
Okay, RSU 26. We met with them last week. They currently use the Keith Anderson building as an evacuation space, not for the entire school, but for a portion of it, and only in special circumstances. I don't know if it's ever really been used. But it's there as an
For
opportunity.
drills?
It is used for girls, okay.
They would use it in more of a situation of a gas leak or a pipe burst where the students are not necessarily in any danger, but they can't occupy the building is where that safe space belongs.
And they've explained to us they would use other buildings on campus first. Unless there was also an issue there, then they would come here.
Haven't they also used the building as an alternative testing site?
So they have in the past used it as an alternative testing site. They used it as a spillover for rehearsals, play, show choir. So essentially, the relationship we have had with the school in the past is when they call, usually. So when they call, we kind of just open up the doors and let them utilize it as if we were utilizing it. So I might not have exactly the same kind of records that I would have for it.
So again, this meeting, I put some of this plan on myself. It kind of got twisted. I would want to focus on the space that was available for you folks to use. They kind of turn around on, well, how could they use some of the spaces within the town? This is one that we'd like to go back to and revisit it.
Yeah, good idea.
Because they do have space that is available, and obviously Megan uses some of it, and they gave us a priority list. The town is actually third in that priority list out of 6. Similar to you, Maine, well, students are first, then faculty, then the town.
Perhaps that has been your experience.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think this is gonna be a different conversation with town council because there was an agreement that was created when the district split from the town. The town transferred ownership of the buildings and the land that they're on with some kind of caveats. And one of those caveats had to do with town use of school space.
So I think that's a bigger conversation than necessarily the facilities thing, but that's something I think we're gonna.
Whether you want us to do it or the council takes it on, or members of the council.
Yeah, I mean, I think that may be an ongoing conversation we have. You know, concurrent with our building discussion. Sure.
But I do think it would be good to go back and clarify so that, one of the questions that we had at the very beginning was around availability and community tolerance for looking at a broad array of amenities that are not controlled by the town, and whether or not, for example, one of the things that comes out about Keith Anderson is the performing arts space, the stage and the lights and all of that. And if we're going to bring it back to that level, Chris would tell me, I think, that there's a different level of code involved with that as opposed to if we were using it for small gatherings and meetings and other types of spaces. So one of the questions that I want to have answered for council or council to be able to talk about is if up on campus, we had Minsky Hall, Health Auditorium, Cyrus Pavilion, the Performing Arts Center at the RSU, do we need to invest in that level of investment in Keith Anderson to bring back performing arts space? And maybe the answer is yes, but I think we should have it not in a vacuum, a larger conversation. So I think it would be helpful for us to understand more of the school's perspective of how and when the town would be able to use things.
So I gathered from that conversation that the Performing Arts Center was more available than some of the other spaces. It's like Brewer, we have one in Brewer too, and it really gets used. Nice space, but it doesn't get used a lot. And it's a great space, it's like one Brewer.
Personally, and I'm not sure if I just heard this correctly now, but personally, I feel like that. I would rather have us have a conversation than have a consulting firm have that conversation personally. Maybe I'm at odds here, but.
No, I think
That'd be
you're right.
unusual, but
I think we want to continue to have that conversation. We just don't want to hold up Haley Ward's business. Well, we do it.
So I think right now Haley Ward is a big question mark because I don't know that we've got answers. And I think we would be looking for answers. And then let the town council have the discussion about whether or not those answers work.
answers to what questions?
Availability.
Of their space?
Yes.
Oh, I thought this was about our spaces.
Well, we really didn't, they turned the conversation around to what spaces you
intention.
had, they could use rather than what we're trying to do.
Oh, so I thought this was all about our spaces to begin with. I wasn't thinking that that part of this exercise was, which I'm all for, leveraging those spaces. So, okay.
Well, I think it's part of what Sophie just said, right, is that if some of these spaces are available after school, then is Keith Anderson really needed? I think that's.
Or
that's-
is
or
that
for that
use of
Right.
Keith Anderson needed? Could we do other things? Could we reduce some of the capital investment if we weren't saying we were gonna use it for public purposes? As an example.
As an example, but broadly applied to all the buildings and all the
Absolutely.
resources
Absolutely.
owned by other entities.
Right.
And understanding that if we are counting on other entities, then council would have to figure out, do we want to try to get agreements in place so that it's not as hit or miss, or, but that becomes kind of a council. This is supposed to be more of a fact finding mission.
So they did get us their community use school facilities form, which is online, actually. And they provide the prioritized list. And that's, we'll include this in our report. They're also going to be getting us a document that lists the rooms that are available for use.
But they're not available for use. You have to pay for them.
I believe that is true.
The school
But we've
has
asked for that as
never-
well.
Yeah, the school's never charged us to use school space ever.
The library just used the Performing Arts Center a month ago. There was no charge.
But there was wasn't there a grovel?
No, there wasn't.
Sorry, what?
Quite accommodating.
Good.
It was very nice.
That's good to hear, because that's not what is going, that's not what circulates in the community.
No, Daniel Perkins is the facilities manager, and he was very accommodating. And happy to have us
Okay,
there.
that's good to hear.
He was. It's very nice.
Yeah.
So as far as space that they would like to see, they do want to be a community partner. They would like to see some sort of teen space for after school students that are in athletics that are primarily tuition students that don't have a place to go, that have time enough to go home in Glenburn or wherever they're coming from, and then come back. And the Keith Anderson building I mentioned might be a good spot for that. Some programming needs for K-5. They didn't give any specifics on what those programming was, so we could dig a little deeper there. They're interested in outdoor learning spaces, similar to the space that's a library.
So they want an amphitheater?
They do want it there, preferably on campus, they said. And they were open to the historical society displays.
They were also interested in, it wasn't just an amphitheater, it was also, you know, some communities have done things like yurts. You know, weird other kinds of buildings that are outside spaces, but are more temporary in nature. Yeah, I heard that.
Look and see if there's any more specific notes. They mentioned the space for robotics.
Yeah, they did.
I think an important note about specifically bringing up the robotics is when we have either a contracted someone or a community, someone who's interested in teaching a robotics class or a large scale art class where they need a lot of materials and they need those materials set up because it's very time consuming to take everything up and put everything away. A space like that to have more a longer time frame for some of these programs that would take a lot of time to put everything up and away versus renting a space like the Keith Anderson. If someone else is coming in the next day, you do need to put your things away or secure them away. So that was part of that robotics need was brought up, that large scale space need.
For a longer period of time.
For a longer period of time, an uninterrupted period of time.
I think that was it as far as she wants to. Do you want anything else? No. Okay. So out of these, we have just some high level takeaways.
The wording of this first one, I'm not sure. I think this is that the groups that were in the building had appreciation that they were able to use the spaces. Is that what that language is? Okay, all right. Yeah, so a lot of the tenants, they like their space. They don't want things to change. They want to stay in those buildings if they can. A really key thing that many people said was that there needed to be updated accessibility for Birch Street and Keith Anderson if those were going to continue to be used for events where people assemble. Well, Keith Anderson for events where people assemble, but the thrift store was the big place that really needed accessibility. Although that building has not one of the entrances on it is really accessible, so it definitely needs that. Another thing that was noted by a lot of people was how the Birch Street building and the library are starting to make a center in town that I don't know if it wasn't always there, but it's a draw. People come to the thrift store, but they also come to the library, and they also come for the vegetable garden and things like that. So all of those things are sort of resulting in the development of a perceived center. The upside of that is that the library is right there, so, and they're in the middle of a transformation, so the library could be part of the solution to some of these spaces that are required. But there's also the other side is that, if you have a lot of events happening in this area at one time, it's real easy to overload the parking situation that's there. And then as regards to the Keith Anderson building, again, we brought it up before, but a lot of people have been to activities in that building. They think of it as a place where they learn to do karate or whatever. So it's a popular in people's memories. It's a popular building. And then one of the things we talked about is other things to do with that building. Would it be better served to be developed by somebody outside? Outside of not the town, but another group, or or, you know, what exactly could happen to that building to take it to the next level?
So I'm gonna interrupt if I can,
Sure.
just to say, I wasn't at the stakeholder meetings, but I was at both of the public meetings, and there is a theme, I think, that is developing if you look beyond the detail, and that is over time, Keith Anderson has been a place where the community can come together in small groups to do many different things, and I think those different things change. And I think when we look at however we end up deciding, you know, the price tag for bringing these buildings up to code and managing them in an effective way is going to be significant. But I do think that, you know, as Megan said in her initial Keith Anderson building presentation, it is a building that might not have a defined purpose like a public safety building, but that grouping of people in a kitchen and a room for people to be able to do various things at. The other piece that I don't want to lose track of is, you know, we've heard from some about the things that we don't do anymore. And the one thing I have figured out is that Orono is quite cyclical in the way, or transitional, in the way programs and services are delivered here. So we get a group of people who really like contra dancing. We have contra dancing because the town's position is, how can we support you do that? We don't have staff. How can we support you do that? Arts Cafe, the community theaters, they are active community theaters in this region. We use them. We got to a point where they needed to do things that were bigger than what we could support. We also have issues where when people want and have the capacity to do their own thing, they very rarely also want to follow what the town rules are. And the town rules are not things that we just come up with from thin air. They're what allows us to have insurance coverage and things like that. So that idea of having these independent groups come in and just rent space is always a good one. But I would hate for us to sit here and say there is no karate right now, because we went and elected our karate instructor. But that doesn't preclude there from being karate or dance or whatever in the future. The town of Orono, I don't think has ever really been set up that we've hired those people to come in and do that work, but rather the community says what they need and we support that need, which means that what we need, I believe, is to make sure we're thinking about that transitional space that can be used for multiple things, wherever that happens to be.
I'm using that space right now.
Yes, you are. I mean, we didn't add that anytime the whole staff gets together, it's either there or the public works garage, and as you can imagine, that's two very different experiences.
The old one?
The other thing I'd add about having access to spaces is that we have prided ourselves and really been intentional about keeping Orono a community that has provides access to people of all different socioeconomic status. And just having a place where a family can gather at a really low cost can be very important. You know, for a birthday party or family reunion or whatever. And even if it's not utilized in that way all that often, maybe just a couple times a year, for those people who do use it, it establishes Orono in their mind as a place that's really welcoming. So there's probably value. I don't know how to number that. There's probably value to that.
Yeah, and we have it set up that we can do that and keep our insurance company happy, which is always a good thing with the tulip program and stuff like that. So I think part of this is around promotion, but I also think we need to find a way that everybody can enjoy the spaces that we're going to name as community spaces. And right now, I think we have some issues with that.
Well, so I kind of wonder if this transition, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Megan, but before you started, it sounded like there may have been some keys for some of these facilities floating around out there. So people could just go use them. And that's changed
Yeah, a bunch.
a bunch.
I think that with changing of staff, and reevaluating policies behind some of how folks rent buildings and access buildings, some of that changed, and the key system, I think, is in a much better place now.
Yes.
And it's in transitions of staff, things like that sometimes happen, but I think we're in a different place now.
Well, and that's a good thing. The public just need to understand that it is available still. We just can't give out keys to everyone.
I'm surprised you didn't.
You did.
Oh, you did.
So just a note, when I started, I got key number 75. I asked, where are the other 74? And no one had that. That's just a place to
Grab
start.
equipment.
Two of the tenants of Keith Anderson were just there, and we've heard repeatedly how appreciative they were that the town has offered them space that they're able to use. And they were. We'll go anywhere. We're just happy to have the space to have this.
And also they weren't, those groups were not using a lot of the space either. I mean, most of the building is still.
And that's Orono Land Trust and who else is it?
The library.
Okay, yeah.
I think Lori said solutions for the Friends of the Library, so I don't think they're gonna need that space moving forward.
They created a partnership with Kiwanis, who has a new book barn, doing monthly book sales, so to eliminate the need of space and a lot of time put into sorting and whatnot. They've come up with a partnership with Kiwanis to take their books there and ask for a donation every year.
Oh, that's good. Because she was concerned about having 20 a year.
Yeah,
Wanted to do more, but it was a lot of effort,
so
not a huge money maker.
So after November, they're doing a sale, I think November 5th, and after that, the room will be cleaned out like once.
So we can thank extraordinary library volunteer Mark Billick for that arrangement.
So there's another page of takeaways. If we can change the slide. There we go. As far as RSU 26, we've really been over this already, but they have a rental policy online. They will provide us a list of rooms for rental and use, but the town is not at the top of their priority list. It's kind of in the middle. And then the University of Maine, they come at it from a different sort of economic development incubator co-working space at Keith Anderson. That's one thing that that we discovered. But we also discovered that it's difficult to plan to use their space because there's a definite bureaucracy and hierarchy to how you deal with them and getting permission to use spaces. They also will provide a list of rooms for rental and use, but I would point out we don't have the list yet.
For either.
Location, actually. Yeah, they said they would.
And I would just say it has been our practice when we use other people's space, like the school or the university, that is a town sponsored thing, that we don't just pass through that authority, because that can create all sorts of hurtful.
Okay, so what's next? There is also a community feedback form on the town's website, like, so I don't think we've seen that. I don't know if we've collected much
We've
information.
been collecting it, we'll get it to you.
Okay, so we're gonna combine that with the information we have. As mentioned, we'd like to have further discussion with RSU 26 and UMaine, whether that's us or you folks. I don't know yet, that's, you know.
I think the
part of
challenge
feedback.
is just getting 6 people together for more than half an hour at a time.
I'm not sure why we're having discussions about our community buildings with human.
So I think twofold, the initial impetus for the discussion with UMaine was more about what can we use on your campus. Okay. But also, when we think about options for building space, my job is not to drop things out, even if I'm not sure that council will support or not. My job is to put everything on the table for you guys to talk about. Keith Anderson with a $1.2 million price tag to rehab. One way to get that funding would be through an EDI grant, which is an economic development grant. In order to get that, we would have to use it for economic development purposes. So downtown, Keith Anderson, even before this discussion, we talked about using a portion of it for business incubation or networking or things like that.
I don't think that that's gonna go over very well.
So my job is not to be the arbiter of what is good information or bad information. Our job is to bring it all to you. And you guys can decide what works or doesn't. Otherwise, if I start parsing out what I think is good information, then I'm giving council half the information, which is definitely not my job. So, I guess part of this check-in is to say it's taken us a while, but it's been a timing and summer vacation line being one that really threw us out of whack, and I apologize for that. Haley Ward has been doing an outstanding job facilitating meetings and talking with the public. I have been thrilled with the way they have represented the town in this, and Megan, Mitch, I think they're doing a nice job. What we wanted to do to bring this to, bringing this to you today was number one, to tell you what we've done. Is there a hole where you can say, we really should be looking at X so that we can include that in the report as well? Because again, the job is to get all the information. That's why we wanted to do these community conversations. The next step is going to be, you know, we've kind of shown you kind of some of the themes we're hearing. And Chris and his team would do some evaluation at the very high level of where we are in terms of, for example, if the only conversation we've heard about Birch Street School is to make it better to use, not that that we should shrink that. So I think to walk through the Birch Street School and look at the use of the thrift shop and the space and what would it take to make that work better for them, and also the code, which is kind of the concern. I think safety and accessibility is one threshold. I think bringing it up to standard. Because remember, at the end of the day, the goal with this entire assessment was between this, what was happening at the library, the public safety building, we have other buildings kind of evaluated. The goal here is to bring us back up to a standard and then create a sustainable stewardship plan moving forward. The goal is to, if we're using the space, then let's make sure it meets code and is safe and accessible for everybody. And that we have a way to maintain it moving forward and a commitment to maintain it moving forward. And if we can't, I mean, we might have to prioritize, you might all decide this is the amount of money we can spend. And then we'll talk with them about the next step of how do we prioritize that and what makes the most sense moving forward. Sitting and allowing people to struggle to use community buildings that are not accessible and allowing buildings to fall apart does not seem like a wonderful path forward. So that's why we embarked on this process.
So when this happened just before we came in with the last batch, where is that information on the buildings falling apart?
So it started with the Keith Anderson house. There's a whole bunch of, there's a report that Megan and Tom worked with John Cormick, who I think is the former CES person.
He was, but at
And
the time
he-
he wasn't, he was volunteering, I think that helped you guys, but I reviewed the building with him,
Yes.
so it's very formally mine.
Oh. So that is where we came to a pretty conservative number with John McCormick's help. Then we had the fire station falling apart, literally, and clearly not up to code. And we have the Public Works building that the town council has kind of not been able to land on what to do with it. And trying to figure out all of that at once. How do we kind of move forward? And then the Birch Street School,
Which is arguably the best of the bunch in terms of how it's doing, however, it has a lot of.
Yeah.
issues.
and everybody looks at the Birch Street School, and I'm guilty of it because I finished up reporting on a USDA rural development loan grant for that during my tenure here. So I'm like, oh, that just happened. Well, that was upgraded 25 years ago, and it wasn't being used for the purpose. And I think we as a town like to make do. So we'll throw up a wall when we need another office, or we'll move things around when it's needed. And what happens is we then end up not meeting code, chunked up spaces, and I think we want it to be much more purposeful in this review moving forward. So, if you want to go back and look at that, we can come up with Nancy's help.
And First Street. 'Cause I
Birch
assume,
Street, we don't have as much, that will come out of this, but the request for the elevator predates me 11 years ago.
And in my mind, I'm thinking with, and maybe this is inaccurate, so I want to ask, someone approached us next week and said, I want to buy that property, the former
Public Works.
Public Works. I thought we at some point were trying to sell that. or get rid of that.
So
Why is that?
we tried
Correct.
to find a use that was not a garage, not commercial, and not student housing was the direction staff was sent in. And we utilized, our network and cannot find, if you tell us that you would be happy to sell that for student housing, I could sell it tomorrow. If you told me that you were fine with it continuing as a garage or a private sector contractor, we have had people ask if they could buy it, but what we've been told is those feel very incompatible with the neighborhood and did not want to pursue it.
It's the people on our street. That don't want to see what we're trying to do.
So the purpose of this is to try to kick off, Leo, some council conversation because staff is kind of at a standstill and we'd love to be able to support what council wants, but we don't.
It's interesting you mentioned that about traffic. I don't think that was mentioned in any of our meetings.
It's interesting because they were focused on dog park there. I think in the meeting that we were at. With the-
I think the dog park, yeah.
And a single family home or homes, because there's 3 acres there. The problem is the VRAP for a single family home makes it pretty cost prohibitive for somebody. Because it's a different standard than a different type of
Remind me what the BRAP is.
voluntary response action plan. So because it was a public works garage, we had to do all sorts of brownfield assessment for contaminants. Even though they couldn't find anything, the underlying assumption is because it was a public works facility for so long, there has to be contamination. We just didn't happen to find it with our 16 cores. What we have to do is depending on the use, some of it is simply to put an amount of cover material on it and note it in the deed. Others, it's geotextile and more in a deeper costly.
That sounds like what we had to do with vapor mitigation.
So the plan here isn't about do we sell a building or do we not sell a building? And I know it has been kind of like, gee, you're just trying to make the cover to be able to sell a building or not. The issue here is we have a public safety building, a public works building, and a library and a town office that we use every day. We're looking at every day, and there's a plan to fix them theoretically. we have nothing in place, no reserves, no plan to address what's happening in the other buildings. And quite honestly, when you look at the Birch Street School and you say, it's not really accessible, and I can say, gee, I spent $14,000 to put a ramp in 11 years ago. That is falling apart because instead of doing an add-on, we should probably be looking at what is the long-term best way to ensure accessibility. So that's kind of where we are. And the entire purpose of this is to give council all the information that these really smart people and my staff can come up with to be able to then parse through and make some priorities. And prioritizing is really hard, especially sitting around the council table, because what you have to say is one thing is more important than the other. When you know out in the community, whatever you're saying is second in importance is first in importance.
There's at least one person who feels that way.
Yeah, there's no way out of this smelling like roses, for sure. It doesn't matter what we choose or do. People will be happy and people will be
You
happy.
could build the nicest rec facility at the old public rec facility, but traffic is gonna be a problem. Or, yeah,
Such as public service.
Do you have, are we missing, do you see any gaping holes in what we've done this far, or have we gathered enough information to just kind of?
I'd be interested to see the community survey that we did online.
We've got,
I think that's a missing piece, right?
yeah, so I will tell you, I've been reading them as they come in, and they are remarkably similar to what has already been talked about there. Each one is important, and we will include as an appendix to this report, and when Haley Ward looks at them, we'll take that information. But the themes are the same. The themes of that space that can do multiple things is really important.
and our report's gonna be a little more detailed. We have 7
Yeah.
pages of notes from all those meetings that we kind of just touched on. This is kind of the template for our report. That's gonna be more detailed. We'll include the background from the university and from March 26th. Put more information. There's probably gonna be information overload for you the first few times you look at it. And then the goal is to prepare this report. We'll likely review it with the staff first. Make any tweaks that we need to it, and then come back and represent to you folks at a later date.
And the goal is, we put in the assessment project, a very high level kind of budget number to address issues in buildings. The hope being that as we pare down and decide what we want to do, we could go back and get a more recent, updated and detailed analysis, but maybe not have to do with everything to do with formulas, but rather kind of pick and choose. Because that gets really expensive. I like Chris, but he does charge us for this.
Yes, we did. Sorry.
I think the gap, I guess, which we have no control of, would be that 31 residents, and community members attended, and 7 online, so 37. I don't know if the duplicates there or not, but that's a pretty small sampling, and I'd be curious to know of the 38, like, how many were invested in the buildings that they came to talk about.
Most of them.
Boy Scouts, I know, sorry.
Yeah, I think that'd be fair to say.
And but I have no idea what we've seen for, it's community participation, it's a problem. And so this, I don't know what the solution is, but that to me is the gavel.
Hey, we can spend money and get a nice, statistically relevant community survey out there if you want, but you're spending bucks.
I don't even know that you spend the money, they're gonna fill it out, to be honest.
I think that might be something we want to do later,
When we talk about final kind of options.
when we have things a little more burned up.
I think a big part of what we're doing here is also allaying some suspicion on the part of the community that the council just wants to have a fire sale. I mean, I think we want to be thoughtful in the way we spend our money, in the way we devote, how much staff time goes into the process. But I'm not sure that without having a group like Haley Ward come in with clear eyes, we would be able to, relieve some suspicion. So hopefully this process, even though it's longer than we thought,
Yeah, when was the Webster side school torn down, like in the 70s? And the community has not forgotten
Yeah.
it. Has not forgotten it, and they,
Right,
that
we can
is,
talk about that, we didn't have that space that we have. There.
Can't really do anything.
It's really, that's almost
It's not only that small, but it's deed restricted
too cool.
to educational. So we're trying to work on some proposals there.
We had a little bit.
So what I'm hearing from folks is that Haley Ward, you have done a great job thus far. And we can't wait to see what you have coming back. And I will work with folks a little bit on reaching back out to RSU 26 and the university to make sure we have good information moving forward. And I think we need to do that with some very specific questions. So with that, I think sounds good.
Good. Yeah, and part of this obviously was, us acting as a liaison, we have no vested interest in these buildings, so. Showing impartiality towards these, I think, help people open up.
We were able to, we did have people come to us and say, what are you gonna do with this building? We're really worried about it. We were able to say and that all we're doing is collecting information and figuring out what to do. So we're listening to you, whoever person who's concerned about this building. We're listening to you to find out what your concerns are. So, and we've been able to do that. So that's a valuable part of it.
Awesome. I think we,
All set.
got an executive session.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, we're gonna say it. So.
Matt, would you like this?
Oh, yes, I do. Could I have a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 405-6D to discuss collective bargaining negotiations between the town of Orono and the Maine Association of Police Orono Unit. Second?
Second.
Oh. All right, moved and seconded.
I caught it.
All those in favor?
Is Sonia with us or not?
No.
Okay, so all those in favor, we will go by hands now. All are in favor.
Okay, give me this.
It's 7:55. Moved by Jeff, seconded by Leo.
So the next step would be for us to turn off this, since Sonia isn't here anymore. I'm not gonna worry about. So we are gonna back, we're coming back, but we just won't do it on camera. We'll make a notation for the minutes.
The only action after executive session we adjourn.
Yes.
oh,
No,
no, there's an order.
no, there's an order to ratify the contract. Okay. On that note, I'm cutting the feed. Thank you, Val.
Thank you.